of diagnoses, including developmental delay, fine and visual motor delays, ADHD, anxiety, autism, cerebral palsy, like Down syndrome, other genetic conditions. So many of our kiddos have emotional regulation challenges, executive functioning challenges, all of that stuff. So I've taken a variety of courses, but this is one, emotional regulation is one that comes up a lot for us in OT world, as I'm sure it does for you. I'm thinking, assuming a lot of you are teachers as well, so you see a lot of this too. So I'm going to pass you off to Kirsten so she can introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kirsten Amundsen. I'm an occupational therapist. I am working alongside Joanna as a lead occupational therapist at Chicago Pediatric Therapy and Wellness Center, where I currently work in our clinic setting. I have some experience in the school settings, however, and I'm also accredited through Illinois Early Intervention. I went to St. Louis University to get my bachelor and master's in occupational therapy. As mentioned, I've practiced in private clinical settings, therapeutic day schools. I've run different groups, and I'm accredited through that Illinois early intervention system. I have had various trainings as well, and very similar to Joanna, children 0 to 18, with the primary population being between 2 and 7, with a variety of different diagnoses, autism, ADHD, anxiety, etc. A lot of those emotional regulation kiddos that we get, especially those early ages, those twos, threes, fours, we get often referred for. So we have some good background and experience in that population. So, we're going to go through some objectives really quick here. So this is what we want you to take out of this course, what we're hoping that you'll understand when you leave today. So defining and recognizing regulation and dysregulation, understanding the concept of co-regulation and its impact on development, develop and understand steps to self-regulation, and implement effective frameworks for the whole classroom to foster self-regulation.
One thing I just wanted to mention, so feel free to use the chat box if you have any questions. We'll be kind of
Yes.
monitoring that as we go, or feel free to just like unmute yourself too if you're okay with that. And we're okay with being interrupted, so please feel free to jump in with questions or whatever you've got. So sorry, just wanted to make sure I said that too.
Yes. And now that you have learned a little bit more about us and what we do, we want to know a little bit more about all of you that are with us today. And I know some of you already started putting your information in our chat box. Thank you so much. But we want to know your profession and kind of like ages you work with and where you're working if you're in school. Do you work with children with disabilities and kind of what emotional regulation challenges you experience in the classroom? Just to get us start thinking about those different populations and what we can help with throughout this presentation. So if everyone can take just a minute or two to introduce yourself and you can see who else is with us today, we would appreciate that.
We also already saw somebody is here from Maine, I believe, which is
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool. So welcome. Thanks for joining us.
I don't know if you guys have better weather in Chicago. It is snowy and cold and feels like winter. So if any of you are with us here, it's pretty chilly and yucky.
Yeah, lots of preschool, kinder, social worker. Yay.
Preschool social worker, kindergarten teacher, first grade. Yeah. Someone mentioning like seeing more regulation challenges in the last few years. I also feel like
Yeah.
a lot of you are getting the children that were true like COVID babies,
Yep.
and were, affected by the lack of interaction when they were younger and difficulty with all of that. And I do think that's something new that we're encountering for the first time. And it's uncharted kind of territory. So I do feel like um, in the coming couple of years here, the really true kind of COVID babies are coming into your classrooms and we're experiencing those heightened emotions and challenges for sure. Awesome. Okay, everyone
All
can
right.
continue to introduce yourselves in there. We're going to continue on just because we have a lot of things to get through today. We want to make sure that we cover everything that we need to. So we are going to start with kind of a pyramid model. The pyramid model kind of builds upon a tiered public health approach to providing universal supports to all children to promote wellness, targeted services to those who need more support, and intensive services to those who really truly need them. The pyramid model is a conceptual framework of evidence-based practice for promoting young children's healthy social and emotional development, and its an effective workforce is the foundation for the tiers via kind of systems and policies. So we're going to go through tier one. focusing on like the bottom kind of two tiers here is really where we're going to be helping you all. So tier one is that universal support for all children through nurturing and responsive relationships and high quality environments. At the universal level, we include the practices needed to ensure the promotion of the social development of all children in high quality environments. With inclusive early care and educational environments, supportive home environments, nurturing and responsive relationship, essential to healthy social development. And this includes relationship with children's families and team members. Um, so again, like I mentioned, we're focusing really on these bottom tiers. This is where you all come in. And if strategies kind of like do not help and the child requires further intervention or specialized attention, that's when you would refer out to an occupational therapist or a social worker or other appropriate services. And that's kind of that like top tier. So we won't be focusing on that top tier as much. We're really kind of in that first couple of tiers where we can really make effective changes within your environment. So tier two is that kind of prevention, which represents practices that are targeted social emotional strategies to prevent problems. Um, the prevention level includes the provision of targeted supports to children at risk of challenging behavior, which is more of those targeted social emotional supports, explicit instruction and support, and self regulation, expressing and understanding emotions, developing social relationships, and problem solving. So we're going to be kind of going through these first two tiers here. And just some information on tier three is that intervention, which is compromised of practices related to individual intensive interventions. The tertiary level of the pyramid model describes the need to provide individualized and intensive intervention to a very small number of children with persistent challenges. So again, this is like where Joanna and myself come in, or a social work team, or psychiatry, whatever that kind of looks like. Um, so again, an individualized intensive intervention, which are family-centered, comprehensive intervention, assessment-based, and then skill building.
All right. So, what is regulation? So, regulation is an individual's ability to achieve, shift, and maintain their own levels of alertness to match the task at hand, as well as manage their feelings and emotions. As you all know, this is easier said than done in your own lives as a professional, personally, if you have your own children, all of that. So definitely something that is can really impact your day to day and your ability to function in a bunch of environments. But something I think that as I remind families that I work with, we're all working on a daily basis, and so coming up with some good skills to help our kiddos as well.
The other kind of caveat to that is there's a lot of different definitions of what regulation is. There's kind of interchangeable words, and we'll talk about that too. Sometimes you'll hear like arousal level thrown out there, regulation. That was just kind of the best definition that we had to kind of encompass everything.
All right. So, what kinds of things do you think can impact regulation? So, go ahead and put a few ideas in the chat box for us.
Yeah, go ahead and find your little chat and add some things that you think can be impactful for our students or us.
Mhm. Sleep,
Hunger,
hunger,
trauma,
trauma,
definitely.
yes. Noise level, family life demands, yes.
Cultural
Cultural norms,
norm.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of trauma, support system, home life,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Absolutely. Lots of
Yep,
people mentioning trauma, which I think is so
yeah.
amazing that everyone's aware that that could be a huge piece for
Sleep,
our kids.
yep. Awesome. Okay, so many ideas. Yeah, there's so many factors. Perfect. Okay. All right. So these are kind of how we like to kind of categorize them to a certain degree. So I kind of think of this like a pyramid. So like the biological needs are at the base of that pyramid. So again, a lot of you said like hunger, sleep, all of that. Those are all of those biological needs. Sleep, nutrition, breathing, movement, all of those biological needs need to be met in order for us to help kind of impact and support our regulation. Emotional, so stressors and dealing with family life and other people's emotions, right? A lot of you mentioned like trauma. You just don't know what's going on in a kid's home life, or maybe you do and it is really stressful, but that definitely can be like, what are all those things that happened to that child or to that child before they arrived at school that day that might be impacting their regulation? Socially, so there can be confusing or demanding social situations. This can be tricky. I have some kids that are, as I'm sure you have too, I have a kid who is so great at interacting with adults, but really struggles with those interactions and relating to other children. And I think that can be really confusing for him because he's like, oh, I just keep going towards adults, but like adults keep pushing me to be with peers and I don't understand how to behave or interact with peers and relate with them. So that is really a challenging thing for him in the school environment. We also all have to learn how to adapt our own behaviors to fit social situations. Again, something that is really challenging for some kids.
Especially the neurodivergent
Yes.
population as well.
Yep. Um, from a cognitive perspective, higher level executive functioning skills such as problem solving, memory, attention processing, self awareness, right? These are all much higher level skills, and we need to have some of these other underlying ones kind of have a good basis, strong basis there, right? We have to have good sleep, nutrition, all of that, decrease stressors in order to have those higher level of cognitive executive functioning skills happening. And sensory, I kind of put also in that biological bottom um, the base of the pyramid because your body is constantly taking in sensory information and your body can have its own automatic response, like a fight, fright, or freeze reaction, right? Somebody mentioned a loud environment can be a trigger for some kids that can might impact their regulation. So hearing that loud, unexpected sound might really cause that kid to like run away or fight and hit somebody else, right? Those like fight or flight reactions, those are automatic and they happen to us and they definitely impact our regulation. So sensory is kind of right up there, kind of at the base of that pyramid, right, with those biological needs. All right, so we're going to do a brief. Kirsten and I do also do have another webinar that delves a little bit more into our sensory systems. So we're going to kind of just do a brief overview on how all of these can impact our regulation. Because again, this is just one piece of kind of the puzzle that all fits together in order to support our own regulation skills. So our sense of vision, you see something and your eyes are constantly working and deciding like what's a threat versus what is not a threat. I've had some kids who maybe they didn't notice something in their peripheral vision and then all of a sudden you're in front of them and that startles them, right? And that's going to impact the regulation. So our vision, our eyes are constantly working. Our sense of smell, like biologically we use our sense of smell to determine whether something was safe for us to eat or something like that. Sense of taste, probably less impactful in some ways, but some kids can have really strong reactions to certain tastes. So like a sour flavor or something like that might be really regulating for some kids, but it could also be pretty dysregulating for other kids. Our auditory system, as I mentioned, like we've already touched on this, right? Those loud, overwhelming environments can be really dysregulating for some of our kids. So if we're hearing those like really loud or unexpected sounds, that can really set a kiddo off, and maybe they're just not able to tolerate as much and not able to regulate as well for the rest of the day. Our tactile system is made up of two different systems. We have deep pressure, so more of like a deep pressure massage or a big bear hug, something like that, versus light touch, which is more like tickles or messy play or sensory bins, different things like that. So deep pressure is generally more calming for our kiddos and our bodies, and light touch is generally more alerting. But I have also seen light touch be calming for some of our kiddos too. Um, so just kind of other ways that we can think about how, what our kids could be experiencing that might be impacting their regulation. Proprioception or our system's body awareness. So we get all of the information from our muscles and our joints. And so as we're moving, our body is telling us where we are in space without having to use our eyes. And so the reason we pair proprioception or body awareness with heavy work is defined as like resistive push and pull kinds of activities, climbing up a ladder, wearing and carrying a heavy weighted backpack, doing an exercise, something like that in your own work in your day to day, right? So these are all heavy work activities that help give us a sense of where our body is as we move through space. Animal walks is another good one that we talk about because this can be something that's kind of incorporated into classes a little bit more easily. This system is also a big emphasis on one of the frameworks we're going to touch on later. So we'll talk a little bit more again about this one later. Our vestibular system is our sense of balance and head position. So being able to maintain like an upright head position over our body as we're moving around. You use your proprioceptive system to get to the top of the slide or to get to the top of the ladder. And then when you go down the slide, you need your sense of your vestibular system, your sense of balance in order to maintain that upright posture when you're going down the slide. So this is processed in the inner ear and it works super closely with your proprioceptive system. And then our last one here is our sense of interoception. So needing to kind of understand and know what to do with those internal body cues, such as hunger, thirst, the need to use the bathroom or have a bowel movement, pain, heat, things like that. So, interoception is one of the first steps of self regulation. And if you don't know how to process how you're feeling, then it's going to be difficult to figure out what tools or what you need to do for your body in order to regulate or modulate your other sensory systems or your emotional regulation as well. So, the reason we kind of put all of this here is if one system is affected, then it can impact attention, it can impact like fine motor, it can impact so many other things that can, spiral into that's those self-regulation skills throughout the day. So just being aware that sensory can lead to all kinds of, or dysfunction in sensory systems can lead to other dysregulation throughout the day.
So, self regulation as a foundation. Self regulation is a necessary foundation for higher level skills, participation in daily life, and overall well being. It emerges from early sensory motor experience and primary movement patterns. So, as some of you mentioned, like trauma, other things that maybe kiddos experience when they're younger can continue to have an impact on them as they get older. But we talk about this all the time, and I actually was wearing a shirt today that said it, regulation before expectation. So meeting the children where they're at in their regulation, whether it's biological in nature, whether it's recognizing those internal body cues, whether it's something is going on at home, um, recognizing that doing their classwork and their academics and things might be a lot more challenging for them if they're not regulated. And it's the same thing for adults, right? We have such a much harder time doing our daily tasks and doing things we need to throughout the day if we're not regulated and not able to regulate our body or emotions if something's going on. How many of you have been sick and you can maybe get things done, but it takes you twice as long, or you can't and you have to take a break or things like that. Just really thinking about those things, that regulation is kind of always come first for our children, and just making sure we're meeting kids where they're at with that. So, what is dysregulation? What does that look like? So, dysregulation is the inability to modulate or adjust arousal level in the nervous system to support attention, focus, and overall participation in an activity. It can look like those fight, flight, freeze responses. It can look like hitting, screaming, biting, kicking, eloping. I'm sure you've all seen these in the classroom or in sessions at some point in your career. Um, Thinking about like what your first sign is that a student is dysregulated. Do they have some of those cues, or are you able to pick up on those things? Um, Disorganization can also be a sign of dysregulation. It doesn't always have to be these like big behavioral responses. It could be a kid that's kind of like laughing uncontrollably, or kind of bouncing around the room, or is just having a really hard time kind of modulating that arousal level. So like in that definition, it's modulating arousal level. So maybe they came in from recess and now they can't get back to attending to the activity at hand. So it's not just regulation in, they're hitting and kicking and screaming, but they are having a really hard time getting their body to do what it needs to in order to participate. Um, Another one I think that gets missed a lot in classrooms or just in general is those freeze responses. And that those are definitely a lot harder to notice unless you're one on one with a child. Those freeze responses get kind of overlooked or missed just because it might be someone that is kicking, hitting, eloping, whatever it looks like, and you have to attend to that first. But kind of making sure that we're still paying attention to those freeze responses or those kids that just kind of shut down or get really quiet or dysregulated in a different way. I definitely get those kiddos in my session that come in, and when they experience difficulty or dysregulation, they completely kind of shut down
Mhm.
and lose it. So, um, just keeping in mind that there's a lot of different types or kinds of dysregulation. So we're going to talk about kind of behavior versus sensory, and kind of um, the differences, similarities, and how to kind of tease them apart. So we're going to kind of go through this, and this is again not all encompassing, but we're going to do our best to kind of tease apart the two different types here. So, before I jump in, I want to note that in the bottom here, like all behavior is communication. So, whether, um, no matter what they're doing, they're trying to communicate something to you, whether it's kind of one thing or the other or something completely different, just keeping that in mind. We have to kind of find the underlying reason for that behavior. It's a little bit of detective work. It might be things due to things going on at home, sibling changes, anxiety, trauma, whatever it might be, that they're communicating something to you through their actions. Um, so to break this down a little bit more, behavioral dysregulation might look like a child or student not getting what they want or need, and then having a behavioral reaction. Whereas sensory is more of a biological reaction to feeling overwhelmed by the environment or sensory stimuli. In behavioral, they might be seeking attention or a specific reaction. Whereas in sensory, they're like really not concerned by your reaction or what's kind of going on around them. In behavioral, they're still kind of aware of their environment or surroundings, and in sensory, they're not in control and do not appear to be aware of their surroundings. In behavioral, the dysregulation may end abruptly, or they can switch in and out of dysregulation, especially if they receive their desired outcome. In sensory, there might be longer lasting meltdowns that need more time to kind of recover from. So, um, just some like different examples because I've been called into schools for what people thought was maybe more of a sensory dysregulation. And when I came in, I found it was seemingly more on a behavioral side of things. And when I say behavior, everything is behavior. Every action we do is a behavior of some kind, whether we view it as positive or negative or maladaptive. That's another conversation. Um, but this kid was throwing shoes in the hallway due to not being able to finish the craft project that he wanted to. And he was throwing. And so the teacher thought the throwing must be because he needs sensory input. However, I was kind of observing him and I watched him be able to stop his meltdown when a favorite teacher walked by. He put his shoes down, he walked over, had a whole conversation with her. Once she left, he went back to throwing his items. Now, the causation of the dysregulation was more of that behavioral piece. And sure, he was getting some sensory regulation from throwing things, and sensory tools can be helpful in an emotional or behavioral dysregulation. But the causation for him was more so in that kind of behavioral category. And again, that doesn't mean that all of that behavior is communication. Why is it so hard for him to stop his project? What's going on there? Why is that transition hard? We have to do a little bit more digging there, but kind of being able to tease out it wasn't a sensory dysregulation in nature. Um, Another example is like a student becomes distressed every time they have to do an art project. That would be a little bit more under that sensory dysregulation. If it was truly because we're doing paints, because we're doing shaving cream, because they're having to touch something that they dislike, maybe it's glue. Um, Behavioral might be because this is really hard for me and I don't want to do the writing portion of it or the coloring portion because that's really challenging. So just some different ways to kind of tease those out. After lunch, a child comes back really disorganized, and you notice them like shutting down. That's maybe more of that overwhelm by their environment or their sensory stimuli. Same thing for a child at home becoming distressed every time they have to brush their teeth. That we kind of see as that like sensory dysregulation. Um, so if anyone has a example of a student in their classroom that they're struggling to decipher the root cause of dysregulation, you can go ahead and either unmute yourself or throw it in the chat box, and we'll be kind of monitoring and see if we can help kind of tease that out for you a little bit more. If you have a situation that anyone wants to kind of go over or review here.
All right, we'll keep an eye on the chat box in case anybody comes up with something they want to discuss further. So, some developmental considerations of self-regulation. So, again, this starts basically at birth, but you also require, you also have help when you're a baby to self-regulate. And so, from birth to 3 months, you're calmed by nursing, suckling, being held by your caregiver. You express your state through crying and body tension. Um, Lots of like fisting of the hands, things like that at this age. From 3 to 6 months, early emotions are signaled through verbal and nonverbal cues. They're usually calmed when picked up. They pay closer attention to faces and they may start to identify their caregiver. From 6 to 12 months, they enjoy watching and engaging in social interactions with adults and other children. They become distressed when caregiver leaves and they start to express their first words. So, again, it's still cued into what their caregiver is, how their caregiver is able to help them regulate. From 12 to 24 months, they display a wide range of emotion and affect. They understand simple instructions. They prefer parallel play, but they are interested in other children. Um, so there's such a, it starts right at birth, and then we rely so much on parents, and that kind of continues for a while. There's such a wide range of how self-regulation kind of occurs. So it develops, it continues to develop, right? So we just went through birth to two, but it continues to develop across ages 3 to 7. And there are like, there's so many individual differences that may influence or predict the trajectory of self-regulation. One super common one is like delayed expressive language skills, right? We get that a lot, that like the 2-year-old is hitting at school when they want a toy, when they're upset, when they're angry, like something like that. And sometimes like we get that OT referral, but then we will also often ask like the speech therapist to do a little screener or maybe do a full evaluation depending
Mhm.
um to see, because right, if you can't express how what you're wanting or needing or how you're feeling, they're going to have a harder time with that self-regulation and that impulse control of like hitting to get what they want or whatever that, however that looks like. So
And we might support them through
yep.
like an AAC device while they're kind of working on those language skills. Maybe we use visuals. We kind of collaborate with our speech therapist a lot to figure out the best ways to help them communicate their wants and needs. And you'll see that a lot with like going up to a peer and hitting them when they're trying to get their attention or wanting to play with
Yep.
them or things like that. And they just don't know how to properly kind of convey what they're wanting.
So yeah, so just implications for school is that this is still a skill that everyone is learning. So children do not have fully developed self-regulation skills when they're entering kindergarten, right? And especially in that preschool age. Emotions are high and they don't really know what to do with them. And so that's what we should be here for. Um, to help them figure it out. They're still going to rely so much on their caregivers or teachers or whoever it is that they're spending their time with in order to self-regulate, right? So just keeping that in mind. So, so just kind of while we were talking about like some attention expectations, things like that, and being able to regulate themselves, I wish this went back further, but we just love this little graph, just because it's a good little visual to keep in mind, like what is focus time and how long should it last for at these various ages, and then how much time of a break do they need in order to like refocus and come back and regulate. And so for 4 to 5 year olds, it's like 5 to 7 minutes of paying attention to the teacher, circle time, something like that. And then they need that 1 minute movement or refocusing time to do something before they're able to come back and do that like structured learning activity again. I wish this graph went back to like 2 to 4 year olds, because like some schools have such high expectations for like a 2-year-old to do a 15-minute circle time. And they are just not ready for that yet. And so we just strongly advocate that you incorporate movement as much as possible, incorporate these kinds of like structured refocusing movement breaks and times, so that our kids, we are setting our kids up for success versus having these high expectations that they're just developmentally not ready to, participate in a 15-minute long circle time. Again, we wish the research went back a little bit further than the 4 to 5 year old range, but it's what we have. So we just like to point this out here. Do you wanna jump in and answer? Somebody put in some good questions that we wanna discuss, so we'll pause here for a minute.
Yeah, we'll just go through. There's a couple different questions here
Thank you
about
guys for
kind of
putting them in for
yeah,
everybody.
about kind of like just emotional versus behavioral. So like the first one I'm seeing here is like gathering saliva in the mouth and then spitting and playing with it. Maybe not upset. They were engaged kind of in a preferred activity. I definitely see kids that will kind of like orally seek through like playing with their saliva
Mhm.
and kind of seeking that way where I have a kid right now that puts a mouthful of water and then like spits it all out. And so typically I'll offer other tools, sensory in nature to kind of help them redirect from that activity. But it sounds like it's maybe more of that sensory in nature, especially if they're engaged in a preferred activity and they're not upset during it. And they're not like necessarily seeking your attention from doing it. Cause we'll have kids that will definitely like spit for attention. They'll kind of like look at you to see if you're going to react. So that sounds to me like they're more of a sensory kind of in nature and needing a little bit more support in that area. Okay, the next one is our child would melt down at the end of the 2.5 hour day and is unable to sit and eat lunch for the extended hour and paces the room but can't sit. Maybe they're just too tired to stay throughout lunch. It definitely sounds. It
Yeah.
sounds like it.
It sounds like they're dysregulated in some way at the end of this. My guess is they're kind of, I don't know what the rest of their day looks like, but my guess is they're kind of like holding it together during those 2.5 hours, and that lunch is just too much. I don't know if the lunch setup too is like, is it a busy,
Mhm.
loud environment and that's the setup, or is it just they're holding it together
Right.
throughout the first part of their day and that's too much?
Right.
I would recommend, I mean, it sounds like your solution is that like the student is just too tired to tolerate this lunch and that seems okay, but I'm wondering too, like for another thing I would try for the future would be like I wonder if some like heavy work or something like that just to bring their sensory system down prior to like sitting and eating lunch in a classroom might be helpful for that student. Or
Mhm.
seeing if we can kind of like give them a bit of a sensory break towards the end of the day before lunch in like a quieter space or something like that and see if that would help with that like lunch participation.
Mhm. Next one is we have a 2-year-old that doesn't interact with much with other children, frequent tantrums, takes her an hour or more to calm down. That's really hard.
Yeah.
Um, it definitely sounds like it could be more of that, like, sensory in nature, potentially,
Mhm.
if it's taking that long to
Yeah.
kind of re-regulate.
I don't
Um,
think kids wanna be mad for a whole hour,
no.
right? Like,
And sometimes sensory turns into more of that
yeah.
behavioral response. There is that happens too. But it sounds like, especially if we're having a really hard time kind of self-soothing or soothing,
Mhm.
even with co-regulation, it sounds like that's more kind of sensory in nature or biological
Yeah,
potentially.
potentially
Um, what's going on? Is there sleeping? Is there hunger, nutrition,
something
something
else.
sensory
Yeah.
going on that is kind of causing this dysregulation? Um, it sounds like we have a lot of questions here about all these different kiddos here. I might have Joanna continue to respond to you guys in our chat here, kind of separately as we continue going. These are all fantastic
Thank you
questions.
guys for putting them
I just
forward.
want to
Yeah.
make sure we continue through our presentation so that we can get more kind of gone through, but I do want to make sure that you all are responded to with your kiddos.
Sorry. Yep. Multitasking.
Okay. Um,
I need help with that sometimes,
so
multitasking.
I want you all to think about like some things that you do to change your arousal level throughout the day. So thinking about in the morning, you get up and maybe you go for a walk, maybe you drink coffee, I play music in the morning to help me wake up. I know some people don't prefer that, and the same thing for like before you go to bed. Do you do relaxing music? Do you do stretches, yoga, mindfulness? What are some things that you kind of do? Or I know during the day when I get maybe a little sleepy, maybe I've been sitting at my desk for a little bit, I have to get up and go take a walk, or I'll do a dance break, or I'll listen to like faster paced music. So thinking about the different ways to kind of change your arousal level throughout the day and thinking about what you currently do. Okay, so we're going to talk about co-regulation. Some people were kind of already talking about this in our chat box, so we're going to kind of define it a little bit more and talk about what this really looks like. I also think this is really important for parents to understand. And so the more that we can educate families on this as the caregivers, when they're at school or in sessions with us. Because I have a lot of parents that come in and say, well, they just can't regulate themselves. So we really have to, explain and define and understand what co-regulation is and how to use it at home. So, co regulation is an interactive process when the caregiver actively listens to the needs of the child, exploring and modulating ranges of arousal level in kind of unison. There are interactions to provide support, coaching, and understanding of those emotions, modeling to students how to decode and express emotions in a safe and healthy way, and promoting positive relationships across all environments. So, this might look like let's say we wanted to do deep breaths. Let's do deep breaths together, or kind of even modeling that without that language piece. So rather than say, take deep breaths, you're, you're explaining to them how to do that together. Let's take deep breaths together. Or you have the child sit in your lap and you are just modeling those really nice big deep breaths. Ensuring that the other important piece of this co-regulation is ensuring that you as the adult are in a state to assist with co-regulation, which is really challenging. I have a lot of parents that come to me that say, I couldn't do it. I wasn't ready. I wasn't in a state to do that. And that is totally okay. And understanding that is a huge first step. And I was not in the right emotional state to help that co-regulation. when it's a parent-child dynamic, there's another layer there, right? When it's your own child versus, kind of teacher to child. Or I mean, in the classroom, it gets overwhelming too. Just like recognizing, do I need a minute to check in with my body, myself, before I go help this child kind of re-regulate? Is there an assistant teacher in the classroom or someone else that can kind of tag team this with me if I need to? Um, and then again, making sure that we are coaching other caregivers on co-regulation and the expectations around this for the child's age to promote that healthy relationship at home. Our 2-year-olds especially are not going to be self-regulating. They might have some very beginning steps, but they're going to need a lot of help. Even our older children, they're still kids, right? I think often, especially as our kids are, growing older, they're 6, 7, 8. The expectation is just kind of doing it on their own and they get treated like little adults, but truly they are still children that are going to need those co-regulation strategies, and it's still appropriate to do that for them. Um, so here are some steps to support student regulation. So kind of helping the student identify that causation of dysregulation, figuring out what they want, need, what's kind of going on to the best of our ability. Again, being a little bit of that detective if they're able to verbalize it to you, or if they cannot, kind of dive a little deeper. Are they sick? Did they eat? Do we know how they slept last night? All of those different pieces. Is it really loud in here? Is it that we did a craft activity that they really didn't like or was too stressful for them? Those types of things. Um, doing co-regulation or assisting with self-regulation dependent on the age and or like their development. And the adult kind of assists with providing strategies based on different frameworks that we will go into in a little bit here. And this might look like things that are sensory tools, calming strategies, and language to promote the regulation. So I know some of you put in some ideas already, or kiddos that they wanted to talk about. Um, but start thinking about those students in the classroom that you want support with, and we're going to start brainstorming a little bit more as we go through our frameworks, and we can kind of keep chatting a little bit more about it. Um, so we're going to go through a few different frameworks here. So our frameworks for promotion and prevention, we're going to go through the alert program, zones of regulation, superflex, scribble spot, and some different sensory considerations. So first we're going to start with the alert program.
Okay. So the alert program is designed to give a shared language for adults and children. Um, to talk about their different arousal levels throughout the day. So it uses the engine analogy where all levels are okay, but your engine can run high, it can run low, or it can run just right. And so high is right, your body's moving really fast, or maybe you're really angry or really excited. And so your engine is running really high in those moments. When your engine is running low, you might be moving really slow, you might be tired, you might be sick. Those, it's when you're not feeling your best, maybe, right? Your engine is running pretty low. When your engine is running just right, you're able to learn, you're able to talk and play with other kids, right? It's in that kind of medium level. So this program was originally geared for kind of like some older students, maybe more in that like 5+ age range, but they keep it and they have used this program through like high school age, but it's very easily adaptable language and concepts. So you can teach it and grade it down to younger students that are like 2 to 3 years old. Sometimes I'll just do like high and low and just kind of take out the just right or that medium level of your engine running. Um, but I like this because there's so many different ways to teach it, and you can kind of use these ideas and then tailor it to each student, and what they might kind of gravitate towards and based on their interests. So some key concepts for this, you want to always teach and understand the concepts of arousal level and self-regulation. You want the student to have a good understanding of the engine levels. In this framework, they talk about the importance of the fight, fright, and flight responses, and about how, really keeping those in mind as you're using this. So some of those like fright kids, right? Like you might see them freeze, you might see them get upset, and how that's impacting their engine levels and what you can do to support them. It really emphasizes the importance of heavy work, right? So that's accessing your proprioceptive system. You're doing heavy work, animal walks, pushing and pulling, resistive activities, different things like climbing, things like that, and how that can really help de-escalate your whole sensory system and your whole body. I'm probably not the only person. Like if I'm having a rough day or if I like really need to clear my head, like for me, like going for a run does works wonders for me. And that's like a great heavy work activity. So that works well for a lot of people. Um, they also emphasize understanding the importance of sensory integration because the tools that they use are sensory tools to help support regulation in this framework. And they refer to these as their sensory motor preferences. So that way you can kind of go through and talk about like some touch tools or tactile tools, some listening tools or mouth tools, things like that. They also really emphasize using various mouth tools with this framework. All right, so a little bit more. So tips for teaching the alert program. It's really, really, really important to share all of the information with the adult in the child's life. So that's the parents, the paraprofessionals, other teachers or therapists that are working with the child. You want to make sure that everybody understands what it looks like for this specific child when their engine is running fast, when it's running slow, when it's just right. There are a bunch of free resources and handouts on the website to help kind of explain this to parents and other professionals that might be working with this child. And really what they recommended doing is modeling a ton on yourself and talking about yourself. And I think that's a challenge about all of these kind of frameworks when you're teaching them to kids is you want to do it so much and model it on yourself so that the kid doesn't like shut down about it, right? Because some kids that really struggle with emotional regulation have a really hard time like talking about when they're anything other than happy. And so doing so much modeling and talking about it about yourself is super, super important. So parents should be doing at home. You should be doing it as the teacher in the classroom, other professionals that are working with that student. Everybody should be doing it, modeling it on yourself. So you want to model, oh, I'm feeling really tired today. I just didn't sleep all that well. Like my engine is running really low or really slow. Um, oh, I think I'm going to get a piece of gum to wake myself up and get my engine back up to the just right level, right? Something like that. So just talking about how you're feeling, how your engine is running, and then what you're going to do to change that. Again, if you ask questions too soon, right, kids kind of have a tendency to shut down if they're struggling with this to begin with. So we try to keep it really fun, um, kind of try to keep it really fun and not trying to pressure them into anything too much. So it's just like a light thing that we come and talk about in our sessions. I love this little visual on the left, right? All right. Sometimes I'll just use these animals too, right? A turtle is they're running, they move really slow versus like a cheetah or a rabbit. They move really fast. So I just kind of love using this visual. Sometimes I'll make it with a little paper plate and get one of those little like arrows that you can push into it so you can move back and forth so that they can show you what level their engine is at and how fast or slow their engine is running. So another kind of tip is having students act out different engine levels. So show me what it looks like when your engine's moving fast, or show me what it looks like when your engine's running slow or just right. So having kids act those things out. I feel like kids also love it when I act things out too. If I'm feeling really angry, like I'll, throw a paper or stomp my feet or maybe yell or something like that. And so kids, I feel like, are much more likely to talk about those maybe more challenging emotions and talk about it if I model it and kind of act it out first. A lot of times they think it's funny, but it's like, nope, this is actually a true situation as well. So that can be a really good strategy to get kids to kind of talk about and acknowledge all of these different emotions with you. Um, so once you kind of go through and have a solid understanding, what they recommend is then going through and figuring out what your sensory motor preferences are. So our 5 categories are touch, mouth, move, look, and listen. The move and the mouth ones they emphasize a lot in this program. Here are some different visuals kind of pictured on the right. So these are from the alert program. Again, we're just kind of doing a bit of an overview so that you can take a specific course that teaches this if you're interested in learning more. But they come with these little like cards and pictures so that kids can practice these things, they can try them out, and you can kind of have different options to remind kids of things that they can do to help their bodies in the classroom. So touch again, right? We have 2 different types of touch. We have that deep pressure, and then we also have that light touch. For mouth, because the mouth, right, that suckle at birth, like a pacifier, a bottle, things like that, like is such a calming thing. They kind of go back to that a lot by using like different, doing straw activities. So, picking up, sucking in, and blowing up a pom pom through a straw and then racing it across the classroom, or using that straw to blow out through and push the pom pom across the table before it falls off on the other side. Doing a lot of mouth things there. You can do like gum if you're, for an older student in the classroom, if that works. Obviously, it can be a big choke hazard too, so probably not an option for younger kids, but an option there. You can also play around with like sucking candies or chewies or different things like that. So there's so many different areas that you can kind of use to tap it. But what I like about it is that it's just like touch or something for my hand, something for my mouth, moving my body, something to look at or something to listen to. So again, it's just kind of easily adaptable language. That move category, these are a bunch of different ways to move in this picture, right? And so I would say this kind of incorporates both that vestibular system and that proprioceptive system. So do I like to swing? Do I like to, somebody had already mentioned like pacing in the classroom, right? We have a lot of kids, I think, that pace for that vestibular input, that like rhythmical movement is really calming for them. Um, Lots of different ways to move. There's also spinning, which often is alerting, but some kids really love that. So yoga can be a great one for in the classroom, or animal walks, getting your head in different positions. For that look category, some kids really like some different like visual timers or things like that. Some kids really love like things that light up. So lots of different options there. Listen, you can think about different types of music, like faster music or slower music or music with like a stronger bass beat. So just kind of thinking to apply this, like what kinds of things are you doing right now to keep yourself awake and alert when we're about halfway through our presentation, right? Um, Sometimes Kirsten and I bring our own like touch tools and we have like a little squish ball that we can play with, or therapy for our hands, something like that. I have cold water in my water bottle because that helps keep me awake and alert while I'm talking. So just thinking about the things that you're already doing and just kind of how can they fall in each of these different categories. So ways to adapt this program, you can do different characters. So you could do the different Cars characters and talk about them. I really like doing like Winnie the Pooh is more of that the engine running just right. Tigger's engine is always running fast or high, and Eeyore's is always running slow. So instead of using that fast, slow, medium, you can just talk about I'm feeling more like Winnie the Pooh today, or I'm not feeling so well. I'm more like Eeyore, that kind of a thing. You can also pair each of the engine levels with colors. Um, these are things that they kind of talk about in the program. So you can teach like a drumming sound to kids. So like drumming really fast is, drumming your hands on the table. Sorry, that didn't really, it probably wasn't very loud through the computer, but drumming my fingers on the table and getting kids to match their arousal level. So maybe you start out really high and then you slow your drum beat down and the kids can kind of like do it to slow their bodies down too. They talk about in the course how a kiddo comes up with zoom versus putt putt. So his body feels like it's zooming sometimes, or driving like a really fast car. And sometimes it's more like putt putt, where he's just, um, slowly going through and, playing, he's putt putting along, right? Like a tiny little old car that's moving slowly. And so that was just one thing that a child had talked about that and was able to relate to. So that's how they talked and used this program. So yeah, if a kiddo comes up with their own words and labels, use them. Feel free to use that and apply it to the classroom if you can. So again, so many different ways to promote in the classroom. You can allow a variety of options from each sensory motor preference category, or pick a couple that you're okay with in your classroom. I think I saw somebody talk about having different like seating options in the classroom. That's a great way to have like move options. So wiggle cushion, an option to stand, or other seating options. Touch. You can use therapy or Velcro strips under a desk, or pipe cleaners to run your fingers on. For the look category, you could do like looking at a sensory bottle or a lava lamp, or decreasing stimuli in areas of class. Um, you could do listen, so playing like classical music or music with a strong bass, and then being aware of echoing or volume in the classroom. You can also offer a student some noise canceling headphones. Again, the mouth category, like sour sucking candies, gum if you're feeling extra brave or have older students, suck and blow activities with a straw, playing like a harmonica, or doing other breath activities. So those are all really great ones. So, some different alert classroom activities, you can picture a variety of emotions and have students put them in the right engine level. Have students pick out an emotion or engine level and act it out, where and other students have to guess where their engine is. You can try out tools in each of the sensory motor categories. When you're first introducing any kind of tool, expect chaos, but provide rules for each of the tools. Kids are going to be excited when they see something new, so it's going to be hard to tell whether that tool is really working for them. But you can just kind of label like it looks like that tool is working for your body, or it doesn't look like that tool is working for your body, and just keeping it neutral like that, right? Because we all use different tools throughout our day. Straw activities in the classroom. I like to also pair it sometimes with some more like interoception activities. So jumping up and down and feeling what your how your body feels after. Is your heart rate beating faster or slower, something like that. So you're pairing kind of like what they're doing with how their body feels afterwards. Are you breathing faster or slower, something like that. All right.
Okay, we're gonna do a quick little like movement break. You can get up, grab water, stretch in your chair. We wanted to kind of keep true to those attention expectations we had earlier in our presentation. So again, take a minute to stretch, stand up if you need, grab your water. We're gonna kind of keep moving through this, but feel free again to kind of move around. I'm gonna take us through a little guided kind of stretch break here at your table or at your chair. But again, stand up if you need to. So sit up tall in your chair, stand up, stretch your arms kind of like over your head and lace your fingers together, turning the palms up to the ceiling. Do a big breath in and out and kind of stretch over to your right. I'm going to hold that for a second here. Take a big breath in and come up to the center. And then we're going to kind of breathe out and stretch over to our left. And then kind of put your arms back down at your side. Kind of feel the difference between having your arms up and down. Take a nice deep breath in and lift your shoulders up to your ears. Hold them there for about 5 seconds, and we're gonna let them come back down. And we're gonna do that 2 more times. Kind of shoulders up and holding them. Joanna's cracking all her joints over here and letting them down. Um, Shoulders up and holding, and back down. Kind of think about the difference between holding your muscles tight and letting them relax. Last thing, we're gonna put our hands behind our lower back and kind of lace fingers together. Stretch your shoulders back, kind of opening up that chest. Keep your head kind of in the center and just kind of look straight ahead and kind of relax the body. A couple breaths here and bring it all back together, kind of shake it out. Again, if you need a little bit more time, you can feel free if you need to run to the bathroom, do your thing. We're going to continue on with our next program, but we just wanted to remind you that we also keep these expectations for ourselves and for our people that we work with, that we want to make sure we are getting those movement break times. Okay, so we're going to go through zones of regulation. Zones of regulation is kind of similar to our alert program. We sometimes will kind of mix the two together a little bit to create kind of a mix of our own program. But we're going to kind of go through what the zones talks about and looks like a little bit more. So, zones of regulation is a cognitive behavioral approach to help students learn when they are in various states or zones. They are color coded with road signs, and students learn with clarity which emotions are associated with each zone. And students learn how to use strategies or tools to move from one zone to another, and they explore calming techniques, cognitive strategies, and sensory supports. They say this is for ages 4 and up. I will say I've definitely used it with those youngers.
Yep.
As I mentioned, like kind of creating my own picture with alert and zones kind of together and kind of mix up a little bit. Um, a couple important things to kind of note here is that we want to make sure that we're giving examples in each color. We're giving examples of blue, green, yellow, red, and we talk about moving through the colors. We don't want to say we're getting back to green zone. I think this is something that was used previously, or a lot of the language that I've heard used in OT before,
Yeah.
in our sessions, in school systems, in, or parents misinterpreting a little bit. We want them to know that it is okay to be frustrated, mad, whatever, sad, whatever the feeling is. We want to make sure that children know that it's okay to be in any of those. Um, um, Nice to be able to identify any of those feelings, and there's nothing wrong with being in a different color. We want them to know that red does not mean bad, blue does not mean bad. I think a lot of kids kind of internalize that if I'm in red, that means I'm bad or I'm doing something wrong. And we want them to know that there's nothing wrong with that. We just might want to move through the colors because we don't want to feel frustrated all the time. Or maybe we want to move from,
Oh, sorry,
sorry about
buddy.
that. We want to, move from feeling really fast and silly to maybe it's time for focus time, or maybe we want to go from feeling really slow and sleepy to maybe a little bit faster. Maybe it's time for recess, or maybe it's time for a yoga opportunity. So how can we move from blue to maybe green, yellow? So again, we call it moving through the colors rather than like getting back to something. So just want to keep that in mind. And I always give that kind of caveat to parents so that they know going into teaching this that it's important for examples in all the different colors and that no color is wrong or bad. Um, so some different examples here. So blue is kind of equated to sad, sick, sleepy. So those are usually those things when you're feeling a little bit slower. I've had kids tell me that like when I'm sad, I'm not in blue zone. I'm blue zone. I'm not moving slowly. I'm mad and sad together. I'm more in that red zone. And I always accept that. I always accept it that if a child tells me that they're that equates to a different color for them, and we also talk about how sometimes you can be in two different zones at the same time. You could feel sad and angry. So you might have a little bit of conflicting there and just kind of accepting those emotions as kids are explaining them to you. We want to, make sure that they feel heard and that we accept what they're telling us. Green is kind of happy, calm, ready to learn, all of those things. Yellow, excited, frustrated, silly, worried, lots of different things that kind of fall in there. When we're silly, we might be moving a little bit faster. When we're frustrated, our body might be moving a little faster. All of those different feelings kind of equated to that, again, that yellow zone. So for some different tips for teaching, ensuring that students are organized and regulated when teaching. As we kind of mentioned, we got a regulation before expectation. So knowing that they are regulated and ready to accept this information, learn this information. So helping students notice like what zones they're in. I typically will start with parents or the caregivers modeling the different zones. Like, I'm feeling really sleepy today. I think I'm in blue zone. And then kind of eventually moving to starting to help the children label or notice of like, wow, your body's moving fast. I think you might be in yellow zone. Um, and then eventually you can ask them, what color do you like? What color zone do you think you're in? But I typically don't start that way because you might get an answer that doesn't quite fit with what you're thinking. Or if there's a kid that's clearly frustrated, angry, upset, and they are like, I'm green zone, I'm happy. Then that's something we kind of need to work through a little bit more, kind of figuring out why they feel like they have to be happy or in that green zone all the time. So I might go back of like, your body looks frustrated to me. It looks like you're squeezing your fists, you have a mad face. It looks to me like you're in red zone. And just kind of going back to that a little bit more of that labeling from, a co-regulation standpoint from the adult, if the child's not quite ready for that next step yet. Um, Visual reminders are really helpful in the classroom or at a student's desk. Again, ensuring all equal examples of given or each zone, not just for green zone, in order to reinforce that all zones are okay. Provide opportunities to utilize a cozy corner, break spaces, and kind of testing out tools with the entire class, similar to the alert program. So, fidgets, movement breaks, going for a walk, drinks of water, different types of breathing, and kind of talking about how that makes our body feel. When we do infinity 8 breathing, how does that make you move through the colors? Does that make your body move faster, slower? And I've definitely had kids be like, it moves me faster. And you're like, well, maybe not. It for me, I'm noticing that it makes my body move slower and just kind of modeling those things or noticing with the student, like, oh, it looks like to me that your body started moving slower. And again, you may have to repeat this a few different times before students are really kind of understanding what's going on there. Some different ways to promote in the classroom. So, blue zone might be things like stretching, movement breaks, going for a walk, talking to an adult if they're really sad. These are things that like we probably all do as adults to kind of move from blue to maybe green, yellow, etc. Green zone, just kind of maintaining. Maybe you want to stay in green zone because you're at school and you're trying to focus. So maybe getting a drink of water, helping a friend, learning. Maybe it's going for a walk. Some of these tools can kind of go in multiple different categories. Yellow zone, doing some deep breaths. Maybe it's doing the straw activities. Maybe it's blowing bubbles, counting to 20, doing some heavy work, going to a safe space, squeezes, hugs, drinks of water. Again, this can be um, maybe different for each child in your classroom too. So you do these experiments and you start listing, well, maybe if I was in yellow zone, going for a walk would be something helpful for me. If I want to move from yellow to a different color, these are the tools that I would use. Red zone, I'm taking a break. I'm asking for help. I have some kids that really love like sour for a mouth tool, and we put that in their red zone category. Or ice water is super helpful to slow them down if they're moving so fast and frustrated. So again, kind of individualizing a little bit for each child and kind of experimenting with these different things. Some different zones activities for the classroom. So we have like an emotion sorting game. So using emojis and having kids matched into the like different color zones. And you can also like add a movement component to this. Maybe one side of the room there's little face emojis, and you have to go over and match to different color zones on like a scooter board or hopping or bear walking to get that like heavy work in. You can build a toolbox, like the picture you hear where we have actual, tools built out and they have their tools listed on it. We've had kids make physical toolboxes of like a box and they put their different things in them. Um, Again, making and testing out those different tools. Um, you can do videos depicting different zones. There's some really great ones on YouTube, like Zones of Regulation guessing game. And there's different characters like from Inside Out, for example, of like, oh, she's so sad. What zone do you think she's in? And kind of having students guess and match what they think. You can do different emotion charades. Maybe you pair up and they have to act out an emotion, and then the peer has to guess what's going on there. So lots of different things that you can do for zones, and you can kind of modify to your classroom and what fits your needs. The next one we're going to go through is Superflex. I will say I've been really loving Superflex. They came out with an like updated curriculum. They had an older one and they just kind of re-updated it, and it's a little bit more inclusive. Some of the language is a little bit different. They changed some of the characters. So actually, this picture we have here, they just updated, and it's no longer a couple of the different characters are switched on here for this newer program. Just as a heads up, if you're using this currently or want to use it. So Superflex provides a fun way in which kids can explore their challenges and identify ways to modify their thoughts and behaviors in different settings. It depicts characters to help students learn about their own behaviors, and Superflex empowers and motivates students to self-regulate, reduce dysregulation as students develop their own um, inner superhero for ages kind of 5 and up. I will say that in this program, there are some more complex ideas and topics and things. I have adapted it slightly for those younger kiddos if I think that they can cognitively understand a little bit more. But definitely great for those 4, 5, 6 year old that really, or if a kid really likes superheroes, sometimes this is a great
Yeah.
buy-in for this program.
Yep.
Um, I have been using this program a lot with my kiddos, neurodivergent kiddos that maybe have like an ADHD or an ADD or something along those lines, where they maybe aren't noticing or they have more of those impulses and are not noticing those kind of social nuances or things that they're doing. And again, the way that I always present this program is making sure that the children do not feel shame for these things. It's truly to bring awareness to like, oh, my body moved way far away from the group and the rest of the group is over here and that's a little confusing. So it's not, why did you do that? It's more so, hey, did you notice that you had some like body drifter going on, or you have some energy hairy, like your body is not quite matching the situation of what we're doing right now. How can we use flexible thinking powers? So again, making sure that it's presented in a way that doesn't create judgment or shame. It's just in a way that promotes a little bit more of that awareness. So, tips for teaching Superflex, there's a bunch of different books, and that's usually the way that we like to start introducing it. Superflex takes on Rock Brain and then Table Unthinkables. A New Beginning is kind of that first book in the series, and there's lots of different books that go into depth of each character that you can also do and look into. And also different workbooks with different scenarios too. You can discuss different scenarios and provide examples. Rock Brain is one of these characters. So I often will be like, I got so stuck on wanting to have pasta for dinner, and my mom made meatloaf. And I felt really stuck on that. I know that's a silly example, but just to get an understanding, an idea of what this looks like. And I was really stuck on it. Or, Zoe got the red pencil and I was really stuck on wanting the red pencil, but I got the blue one. There's a lot of kids that,
Mhm.
little things like that that seem so big and challenging for them. And we talk about that like kind of rock brain stuck thinking. Um, so providing different examples, have students provide their examples of when they think it's happened to them. We will do different superflex drawings, and we will maybe color in different characters. You can also kind of do scenarios and guess which superflex character is kind of showing up in that moment. And you can also make your own superflex characters for some of those older students as well. So a couple different fun ways to get a little bit more involved with it. Ways to promote in the classroom using terminology like such as flexible thinkers, having some pictures and posters around the room, using some of those strategies posted around the classroom or at a specific student's desk, making superflex characters from pipe cleaner. So like this little guy is a glass man from Superflex, and he's a really, fun character that we talk about a lot with our students. So lots of fun ways. This is a really great curriculum to look into for some of those older students. I know there was a couple kindergarten, first grade teachers on here. Like this can be a really great curriculum to look into for your students. The next one we're going to talk about is Scribble Spot. I think this is a newer program that like our academy program has used a little bit more. Our social workers have really enjoyed using with students as well. So Scribble Spots has books, videos, and music programs to empower and inspire children. It promotes powerful and meaningful discussions, teaches social emotional intelligence, and helps explain tough topics kind of in a fun way and encourages creativity. There's many free songs on YouTube. Here's like a link to one, and there's many free or low cost printables. They say for ages 4 plus, but I have definitely
Oh,
used
yeah, for
for much
youngers.
younger. So we wanted to include another curriculum for those youngers because a lot of you are coming from that
Mhm.
early childhood um, setting. And so this is one that we really wanted to make sure we highlighted for our people that are teaching those younger students. There are some more complex emotions and feelings in this curriculum, and they definitely like expand on. There's like a poster of 100 plus feelings, but the main core ones are some of the basic ones like anger, happiness, sadness, worry. There are some different ones like confidence, which I think
Mhm.
is really nice
Yeah.
to teach. There's like love,
Loved.
there's calm. So those are things that maybe are a little bit more abstract for those like really young ones, but also very good to expose them to some of those things early on. A little bit different way of thinking too, which is nice. Um, some different ways that we might promote it in the classroom. There's some really fun, like I said, Scribble Spot songs that introduce those feelings and in a really fun way. There's some book curriculums that you can look into. There's different posters and visuals. We also will do Scribble Spot check-ins. So as you can see in this picture here, someone made one out of clay and kind of drew their own. I will often have kids make their own Scribble Spots and they'll pick out, I feel love today. I feel happiness. I feel a little bit of sadness too. And they'll kind of pick out the different colors that match and kind of scribble them all together and talk about how you can have multiple feelings at one time. So that's a really fun way to kind of introduce it and see kind of how they're feeling. I've also had kids kind of draw it rather than like scribble. They might do it in like different circles, whereas one's a little bit bigger than the other. I
Mhm.
feel a little bit of sadness in the middle here, but I have more love around me that's kind of blocking my sadness. And so they kind of will do it that way too. So kids are very creative and will kind of come up with their own ways. Um, but like I mentioned, drawing, pipe cleaners, Play Doh, all kind of fun ways to get them involved. Different coloring pages. There's Scribble Spots confidence bracelets that you can make, and just again, modeling those different languages throughout the day of those different feelings and emotions. So some pyramid connection to frameworks. So there's more if down here there's a link to more information on the free pyramid models, but we kind of wanted to like link this all back together from those first few initial slides. So frameworks can be beneficial and taught to kind of all students and staff in the classroom. So again, we're really trying to hit those bottom levels of our pyramid. It provides language that everyone can use to communicate emotions. And then if a student continues to struggle with self-regulation, then like that individual intervention may be warranted, that kind of like tertiary or higher level of that pyramid. But we kind of wanted to loop it all back together that these frameworks can be used for
Classroom-wide,
everybody,
yeah.
classroom wide, definitely. So just kind of keeping that in mind. Um, So again, kind of like looping things together here. So promoting positive feelings in the classroom, using these frameworks versus traditional kind of behavioral management tools helps promote positive feelings rather than the strategies becoming aversive or uncomfortable. Traditional behavioral methods at times can be effective for some students, managing behaviors and modeling from other students, but it can also become very adversive for some students. Um, it also really doesn't take into consideration students that have a difficult time controlling and understanding their sensory needs or biological needs, different things like that. And we have to understand that students have to learn and the environment needs to be conducive for that. However, we want to meet the students where they're at and provide strategies to meet their needs. I think when I was younger, I think even now, sometimes there's like those different color sticks of like green, yellow, red. And if you do something that's, looked at as in a negative light, you might move your color from green to red or green to yellow to red. But a lot of those things don't always take into consideration, again, those sensory things, those biological things going on, just overall kind of regulation. And those kids that are kind of always on red don't always have the motivation to get back to green. Maybe they're saying, I'm trying so hard and I'm still getting on red. So I don't want to even continue trying anymore. I don't want to express, my feelings because I'm still getting kind of punished for them or it's not being, seen in a positive way. So just making sure that we are promoting positive feelings in the classroom. So again, quick little check-in as we move into this next part of our presentation here. We're trying to be mindful of everybody here and making sure you get what you need, but check in with your body. If you need anything to change your arousal levels, we're kind of nearing out the end of our presentation here. Grab it, do it as you need it. I know it's a 4 p.m. gets dark here in Chicago, so I don't know where
It
it's
is pitch black outside
it's
now.
very hard to maintain that arousal level when it does that.
All right, so we are going to jump through some sensory considerations for the classroom to support our self-regulation in the classroom. So lighting, just keeping in mind like natural light versus white or yellow lights. If you have dimmers, that's great. You can also get like a cloth cover to go over lights. Keeping in mind sound, is it echoing or very noisy? Maybe just being mindful of those like busier, louder times, like unstructured time, like playtime or recess or lunches or specials, something like that. Those can be really overwhelming times. So maybe pairing that with some like heavy work or something like that before you're coming back to the table and doing some work in the classroom. Visuals, think keeping in mind like posters and decorations versus clean walls, and then consider direction a child is facing when putting desks together. And where is each child seated or positioned in the room, like next to the door or next to the window or closer to the teacher, however you think makes sense for each student. We recommend for calm down corner considerations, having a defined space. It doesn't need to be a tent necessarily, but just a defined area with decreased visual and auditory stimulation as much as possible. We like to have a variety of different like tools available, like tactile opportunities versus like such as a squish ball, putty, or a sequin pillow to run your hands on, using like a weighted blanket, something visual, maybe like a sand timer or a sensory bottle. So having like different variety of tools that are targeting different sensory systems essentially. And then just consider the location in the classroom. We want it to be a clearly defined space. You want to stick with a limited number of choices so that the space is free of clutter. But again, having a couple of different options that are targeting different sensory systems is probably a good kind of rule of thumb when you're setting something like this up in the classroom. So these are just some times that we hear about a lot that are really challenging or dysregulating for students. So standing in line, right? You have to have that body and spatial awareness. So students that frequently bump into others should be at the front of the line or the back of the line, or maybe they can be the door opener to hold open the door for other students. Using a visual marker or dot on the floor, such as like a laminated picture, or each child has like a different colored dot to stand on, something like that, just to decrease some of that challenge that comes with standing in line. Considering lunch, there's smells, the lights, it's noisy, it's busy, it's unstructured. So there's so many times that this can be really dysregulating for our students. So like if you're transitioning in after lunch, maybe try a breathing activity first to bring everyone kind of back to that, hopefully back to that more like just right level, so that everybody can kind of start bringing them down versus like coming in from lunch and then jumping into class. Like, let's all do some infinity eight breathing or belly breathing or something like that. Recess is so important for our kids that need to move, but it can also be kind of an overwhelming time. If kids don't have great body awareness, it can be disorganizing. It could be kids bumping into you. It can be so many different things. So just keeping in mind, like, how can we help bring all of our students kind of back to that just right level after these more challenging times. So some different movement opportunities. There's so many things out there, but like Go Noodle, Cuckoo, Kangaroo, Freeze Dance, Cosmic Kids Yoga, or Yoga flashcards. We've talked about animal walks. There's so many options there. Assigning kids to have different classroom jobs, such as the door opener, passing out materials, or being like an errand runner. Go get this, go bring these books to this teacher, even if they don't need it, but could be helpful for them just to have like a task to do that involves movement or heavy work. Using a weighted backpack or delivering books to another classroom teacher. You can go on a classroom walk. You can do nature walks to other classrooms. You can do a conga line within your classroom, something like that. There's lots of brain break options too, so you can act it out. So act like you're driving a fast race car, act like you're playing catch with a friend, act like you're being chased by a lion, something like that. Um, you can play Simon Says, so working on that body awareness, but also allowing different movement opportunities. Some different seating alternatives here. You can work in standing or a lap desk. There's lots of different wiggle cushions, such as this picture, this little blue one on the right that's round. You could sit on like a beach ball, if you can allow it in the classroom, allowing students to lay on their bellies during circle time. You can sit in a camping chair or on a yoga ball. Cube chairs can offer a little bit more support. Some of our kids that are like falling over maybe need a little bit more of a defined space. So a cube chair, which is this top one on the top left, can offer like a little bit more support for some of our kids. Floor rocking chairs or swivel floor chairs are also great options when we're on the floor. So we want to make sure we're offering students opportunities for more or less movement while they're seated based on like what their need is. And some of our kids like might need to be woken up a little bit. So sitting on a wiggle cushion that allows them to move around might be helpful for them.
So now we're going to go through some classroom activities, and some of these activities can fit into a framework or can be kind of standalone activities to support regulation. So we're going to go through a few of these before we kind of wrap up and go through a couple case studies here. So you can do emotion cards where you're matching the cards before the kids play. Give each kid a card and have them practice the faces. Next, give each kid their secret card, and each kid goes around the room making the face that they were given and try to find their match. When everyone thinks they found their match, they all show and see if they were correct. So again, like kind of practicing that, just acting out different emotions, like emotion charades, doing emotion check-ins at the start of the day. We're using frameworks for check-ins throughout the day. So maybe we do a zones of regulation check-in in the morning, the after lunch, and before you go home, and kind of checking in as the children go out there throughout their day and see how they've changed. And that can loop into some of those tools and things that they use. You can make Play-Doh people mats with emotions. You can use them. There's some from Tools to Grow, OT, but there are others out there that you can make your own. I'll have Joanna throw that in the chat box for you all. The Tools to Grow OT is a
Sure.
great website to access some of these tools. Um, and then Mega Block feelings, draw faces on Mega Blocks and kind of play with them, act them out, different things there. Emotion masks are great. Again, all the things that you need are kind of listed on the screen here, cutting them in half, writing the emotions on the back, and then have the students draw to match. And then you can kind of role play charades with the different masks, which is a really fun activity. Maybe they do it during dramatic play, or maybe you do it as a standalone kind of activity. Emotion bottles are great. You can create your own. We have some that were already created, but you can easily make your own. Here's kind of like a little recipe for them to make and decorate kind of as you wish. This is a really nice way to communicate feelings, especially for those children that maybe are nonverbal or have limited language, are still learning about feelings and emotions. Or I have some kids that again go into that like shutdown mode where language kind of goes out the door when they're in that freeze or shutdown mode. And so this is a nice way to talk about feelings and emotions in a safe way where they can just identify with something as simple as a sensory bottle. Um, There's also Clever's new trick social story, and we kind of create these little thinking bracelets. So the string the red bead on the pipe cleaner to represent like the stop bead, and string three other colors to represent counting to three. And think about what you can do to solve the problem or calm down if needed. So this is a story about a fox who feels left out because he gets really mad sometimes, and learns a trick to help him using a thinking bracelet. Stop, count to three, and think. And then he often like meets friends along the way who are also working on different skills. And then after the story, you can make a thinking bracelet with the students. Excuse me. So that's also a great way to like work on kind of those impulses, stopping, using those breathing coping strategies. It's also a great kind of fidget too. So a multi-purpose little thing there and super easy to make. An emotions flip book, all the things you need here, kind of tracing how many faces you want and cut the circles in half and kind of put them all together. Um, and then you kind of can flip through them like a book and kind of talk about those different emotions. Again, really excellent for those either nonverbal students or limited language, or again, those kids that kind of shut down and freeze. So if you're interested in, doing this or learning more, all the steps are here with all the materials that you may need. Um, Next, we have a few more activities here, and then we will
Yeah, we're
start to
gonna
wrap
try.
up.
Yep. All right, so you can do like stomp out big feelings with dinosaurs, right? Getting some of that heavy work in. You can catch a feeling with a beach ball where you draw a face or emotion and then talk about a time you felt that way. Story stones, you can paint faces or emotions on different stones. You can have kiddos draw a self-portrait. You could do a feelings hop where you tape emojis or other faces to the floor, yell out an emotion, and the kids have to jump on it. So you're incorporating that movement activity. They can also then describe how their body feels or expand it to include, like, let's pick a tool that might help us in this moment when we're feeling this way. I really love this thumbs up, thumbs down jar. So you can have different scenarios in it, and students have to decide whether it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down choice. So just different ways to incorporate like some problem solving and thinking and regulation in the classroom. So sorry, everybody, that's my slow cooker going off. Um, you can do some different breathing activities. So there's infinity eight breathing where you're going to trace one side of the infinity eight to breathe in, and then another side as you breathe out. Belly breathing is feeling your belly rise and fall while you're taking a breath. Square breathing, the same idea where you can kind of trace the sides of the square with your fingers. So you're getting that tactile piece and pairing it with your breath. Blowing bubbles or doing a big dragon breath. Sometimes I have kids that will like that, where it's like a really big exhale. You can use a pinwheel as kind of that visual cue to blow the pinwheel while you're taking your deep breath and exhaling. Bumblebee breathing, a rainbow breath. So this kind of pairs movement. There's a little YouTube video that does rainbow breaths where you draw a rainbow while you're taking deep breaths. Nostril breathing, where you close one nostril at a time and breathe out one from the other. And there's so many different like meditation apps and activities out there. So these are just some different books that we love to talk about with our emotions outside of like the ones that we've discussed with the framework. So Glad Monster, Sad Monster, there's a whole bunch of those. Very Hungry Worry Monsters, Don't Sweat It, How to Navigate Big Feelings, The Way I Feel, and then There's No Such Thing as a Dragon. So these are books that we kind of often use in sessions just to kind of start talking about emotions, but there's so many out there now, which is awesome. We often have some kind of like a sensory toolbox in our OT room that we work in with different coping cards or strategy cards, like a calm down poster. So different options there. So we can make a calm down kit with different strategy cards, put like a stress ball or other fidget in there. In the little container, there's a little pink substance, which is putty, and different breathing exercises. So you can also do like yoga poses, work on deep breaths, all kinds of things. So we usually just like to have this box that's kind of ready to go with a variety of different tools in it. All right. I know we went through that last part really quickly, but we wanted to leave some room to kind of apply. So our first case study here. So we're going to have you guys kind of answer in the chat box. So you have a child who starts kicking, screaming, throwing objects in the classroom. What's your first step here? What are you going to do to help support this child in this moment?
Yep. So we're gonna take a minute or two, put some ideas down in our chat box, and kind of see your, colleagues' other ideas too, and see what you would do for this child. So again, it's a child who's kicking, screaming, throwing objects. Kind of, what's the first thing that you're gonna do for this kid? You guys are absolutely on the right track. I love that everyone just kind of jumped in right
Yeah,
there.
awesome.
Distinguish whether it's
Yeah, review
behavioral,
yourself,
sensory,
remain calm also.
yep,
Yes, love that.
remain calm.
Mhm.
And then people are mentioning
Yeah,
co-regulation.
what's the function? Yep.
Hmm.
Move other students away. Yep.
Hmm. Yep. Okay. You guys are all on the right track. Making sure safety obviously is number one, as you mentioned, and then kind of determining sensory behavior, what's kind of going on. Someone mentioned checking in with their own body to make sure they're in a state, and then applying some of those co-regulation strategies. And then, picking some of your tools that you've tried with this kids, visuals, tools, if they need help in the calm corner. Um, and then kind of picking a tool to implement, and then kind of going back to that co-regulation
Yeah.
if needed.
And that picking that tool might just mean that you're using that tool. If like a kid seemed to like putty in the past, maybe you just have putty in your hands and you're just kind of modeling and sitting with them, playing with it. Maybe they will join you. That would be great. I usually just model some big deep breaths myself and kind of right like you're trying to be as calm as you can in that situation because they're going to feed off your energy. So it's so important to remain calm and regulated yourself too.
Amazing. Good job, guys.
Awesome. Okay, next one.
Okay, so your classroom has just come back from snack and recess time. You're trying to get them to start math. You clap your hands together, raise your voice, but nothing is working to get their attention. What are some next steps in order to kind of get the class back together? So this is not necessarily an individual child. This is like a whole classroom kind of. We say that we get this a lot. This is a lot of feedback that we get. It's just like whole classroom is dysregulated, and we need to figure out what to do. So what are your kind of steps for kind of getting everyone back together? Great. You guys are having some good answers. Lights off, taking deep breaths, breathing. Yep. Everyone's had some really great ideas here. So, again, someone mentioned like using some songs or music. Um, recognizing feelings. I think the someone mentioned doing like a movement break. So yeah, yoga, exactly. So we think that, they just did all this movement. They should be calmer. They should be, ready to learn. They often will need that transitional time too. So we go from this like really high level, fun thing. Maybe they're a little bit more in yellow zone. They're silly, they're excited. They just got to play outside with recess. And now we need to kind of slow down to do math. So either doing some transitional music, doing some breathing, breath work, yoga, something to kind of slow down and transition so we're not jumping straight into an activity that requires a lot of attention and focus. Listening games could also be fun. So again, quiet time kind of coming back in from recess specials, again, helps them regulate. I love that comment, whoever just commented that. So paying attention to those things and those cues that your students are giving you when they come back from their different activities. Um, Here are just some kind of references, resources that we love that we kind of mentioned throughout today. Some of the alert programs, scribble spots, tools to grow, zones of regulation, social thinking, etc. Some different links for shopping for those like books and things that we mentioned are all listed here as well. And we are like pretty much right on time here. Thank you guys all so much for joining us today. If anyone has questions, feel free to like throw them in our chat at the very end here. But we'll pass it back over to Rosalie.